Former living presidents today, and their interactions to many observers looked quite a bit awkward. This all comes as Mr. Trump is battling a tough week here at home and abroad. The stock market tanking over fears that his talks with China's President Xi will not avert a trade war. With each passing day, Special Counsel Robert Mueller reveals absolutely stunning new details about the breadth of the Russia investigation and how much we still don't know. And staunch allies in the Republican Party are breaking with the president very publicly in his defense of Saudi Arabia's crown prince about the murder of that U.S.-based journalist Jamal Khashoggi. CNN's Caitlin Collins is at the White House for us now. And Caitlin's all eyes were on President Trump and his interactions with the Obamas and the Clintons and the Carters. And boy, to a lot of people, it seemed awkward.
Yeah, it was this rare meeting of the President's Club, but Jake, it was made even more noteworthy by the fact that the current president has criticized the other people who are sitting in that row with him. Now, before President Trump and the First Lady arrived, you saw the Clintons, the Obamas, the Carters smiling, laughing, talking amongst themselves. But when President Trump and Melania showed up, it seemed that the small talk had come to an end.
An imperfect man, he left us a more perfect union.
As the nation said goodbye to the 41st president today, the 45th was seated in the front row, coming face to face with his predecessor for the first time in nearly 2 years, shaking Barack Obama's hand as he sat down in the same row at the National Cathedral, but skipping greeting his 2016 rival Hillary Clinton. As those who knew George H.W. Bush best paid tribute to him, those in the room couldn't help but think of the man who occupies the office now.
When George Bush was president of the United States of America, every single head of government in the world knew that they were dealing with a gentleman, a genuine leader, one who was distinguished, resolute, and brave.
But as the Bush family prepared to leave for Texas, Trump returned to the White House to confront the realities of Washington, as officials are forced to read between the lines of the special counsel's redacted memo on Michael Flynn, recommending no jail time for the former national security advisor because of his, quote, substantial assistance, including 19 meetings with Robert Mueller's team. And the opening bell of the stock market quiet today in honor of the former president, after stocks took a dive yesterday due to lingering concerns of a trade war between the U.S. and China. The president trying to shore up confidence today, he struck a successful deal with the Chinese leader, tweeting, "Not to sound naive or anything, but I believe President Xi meant every word he said." The trade drama coming as senators from the president's own party are firmly at odds with his administration, saying that a briefing with the CIA director only solidified their view that the Saudi crown prince ordered the killing of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
There's not a smoking gun, there's a smoking saw.
That takeaway from one of the president's top allies, seen as a rebuke of how he described things last month.
Maybe he did or maybe he didn't.
Now, Jake, we know President Trump had not spoken to President Obama since his inauguration almost 2 years ago, but he had spoken to the late President Bush 2 summers ago when he called him for his birthday, and George W. Bush when he called him when he selected Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court. But other than that, it does not seem that the newest member of the President's Club is very close with the rest of it. Jake?
Well, not one of them voted for him, including the Republicans in that club. Caitlin Collins, thanks so much. Let's talk about this, but first I want to run this clip again of President Trump and Melania Trump walking in and sitting next to the Obamas. You see Melania Trump shakes hands with the Obamas, with Bill Clinton. Hillary Clinton looks over, nods at Melania. There's a little handshake between Obama and Trump, Michelle. But not warm. I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah, there's not a lot of warmth there, but everyone was on their best behavior, as they should be. And to be on your best behavior when President Trump was around pretty much means you can't engage with him too much. And that's just the fact.
When George W. Bush walked in, now he has a different role, obviously. He's the patriarch of the family now and the son of the man who just passed away. But when he walked in, he walked around and shook hands with all of them. Right. I'm not saying that President Trump should have done that, but the body language just didn't scream like, I'm one of you, I welcome you here.
Well, that's the type of campaign Donald Trump ran as well, which is I'm going to take down the infrastructure or what is the presidency in his way, right? And this is a man who attacked President Carter and said he was the worst president ever.
I think he called him the second worst.
The second worst.
Behind Obama.
Okay, behind Obama. And that would make sense that he would be behind Obama.
Hey, they were both there.
He made racial slurs false racial slurs against President Obama.
You mean the birther?
The birtherism in 2011 that he led. And was the spokesperson for. And then President Clinton, he berated for 2 years on the campaign. So, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be pleasant for him. And let's not forget, about a week ago, he retweeted a picture of his political opponents behind bars.
Yeah.
And, this is not too long before.
Maybe 3 of them in that row.
Exactly, 3 of them in that row. And let's not forget what happened about a month ago. Pipe bombs were being sent around the country
to all of them.
All of them. And so this is a president that debases the office that he sits in.
And Kareem makes a good point. He was elected to be a disruptor, and one of the things he's disrupting is that order.
Yeah, listen. So I think exactly, Corinne puts it exactly. That's a campaign poster, right? Saying not shaking the guy's hands. I'm there to kind of shake things up in Washington. Look, there was a headline in Politico the other day. It says, President acted abnormally normal in this case, right? Was very genteel. Went over to Blair House. Sent Air Force One. Was really acting extremely presidential, which makes everybody in this town go crazy, right? Because he's not acting as a disruptor, not acting that. So the guy can't win either way. I think kudos for the Bush family. This was about 41. This isn't about Donald Trump. This isn't about crazy tweets. This is about 41 and a great giant of our country, and I think it should be.
Paul, I'll come back to you. We're going to take a quick break, though. And when we come back, allegations that votes weren't counted and possibly even destroyed, fears of a stolen election now rising in one key race. Stay with us. Welcome back, and we're still chatting with our panel about that moment at the Bush 41 funeral when the Trumps walked in and the air turned ice cold as he hit the pew. Paul, one thing I've seen with a lot of criticism of President Trump in social media and elsewhere, I have seen some conservatives criticizing Hillary Clinton, who nodded at Melania Trump but did not acknowledge the President of the United States.
He didn't reach all the way across 2 or 3 other people to shake her hand.
So it's his fault.
It's, of course, it always is. But so what? Our president met the minimal standards of decency, and that's news. Okay, I'm more impressed with the Bush family. Having worked against George H.W. Bush, helped defeat him, what largeness of spirit that they included our president. I'm glad they did, because, Urban served in the Army. He went to West Point, and he knows you salute the uniform, not the man or the woman. And the Bush family honored the office of the presidency today by including our president, even though he has said some rather unkind things to George W. Bush, Jeb Bush, and even George H.W. Bush. I think that shows a largeness of spirit on the part of the Bush family that far overshadows some maybe tiny micro snub from Donald Trump today.
Can I say one thing? I want to share this. Willie Geist tweeted this information. John Meacham, the historian, the former journalist who gave a eulogy at the funeral today, a lovely eulogy. It turned out, according to Willie, Meacham read that to George H.W. Bush before, obviously, he passed away. And H.W. Bush's response was, that's a lot of me, John. It's a lot of me, which is classic H.W. Bush. Whatever you thought of him, whatever you thought of his policies, he was a man who was uncomfortable talking about himself. He didn't go to the ticker tape parade after the first Gulf War. He didn't go to Berlin after the wall fell. And that's one of the things people like about him.
Yeah, and this funeral was classic George H.W. Bush. It was about tradition, it was about family, and it was about country. And I think that's what he gave us today. And he was very involved in planning this day. And so, kudos to the Bush family and kudos to the president.
Yeah, look, and I think that there's been a lot of debate about this and discussion about this, that, regardless of what kind of president you think President Bush was, 41 was, you have to admire him as a man. You have to admire the individual. He was a good man, a decent man, a guy that everyone should aspire to be, a person everyone should aspire to be in our country, whether you're a president or not, when service and country and family. I mean, this guy should, be kind of chiseled up there on Mount Rushmore as is a fixture. I know there's a lot of debate about the Gulf War and other things, but he really is a decent human being.
But
so I want to, Amanda, one of the things that's so interesting in terms of the differences between Trump and Bush, without getting into the personality right now, is policy. George H.W. Bush, somebody who really was into international relations, alliances, international organizations. He's the one that negotiated NAFTA, which Bill Clinton signed. And President Trump having a difficult time right now with China in these negotiations on tariffs. He called himself tariff man, the stock market not doing so hot. And he tweeted this morning, quote, very strong signals being sent by China once they returned home from their long trip, including stops from Argentina. Not to sound naive or anything, but I believe President Xi meant every word of what he said at our long and hopefully historic meeting. All subjects discussion. It is unclear what exactly is going on right now when it comes to this so-called pause in the trade war.
when it comes to Trump's tariff policy, I don't think it's any more complex than Trump views it as a way to punish people he doesn't like. It's a way, listen, taxes are tariffs. This is about winners and losers, and Trump exerting his power and influence abroad. I don't think there's any principles behind it, and that's why it's so jarring, and you're seeing the effects in the stock market day to day.
This is about basic fairness. The president has stated this out over and over again. If there are no tariffs anywhere in the world, he'd not be for tariffs. He's simply for leveling a playing field here. He's saying, look, if you're
there's an argument on China, but
if you're going to impose a giant tariff on us, you're going to steal IP from us, if you're going to tax our products, we're going to do the same. And we're going to level the playing field for American workers,
but you
American
don't announce
farmers,
it by tweet.
Sure, this is the guy's difference.
After the president called himself Tariff Man on Twitter, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of the Commonwealth of Virginia responded, quote, on Twitter, Tariff Man reminds me more of the Beatles' Nowhere Man. Yeah. He's as blind as he can be, just sees what he wants to see. Your response.
All right, Tim Kaine. Wow.
You like that? Okay.
Tim Kaine going to the I'm not sure anyone knows what the Beatles are.
Right. Not the hippest pop culture reference.
I think here's the problem. The problem is that Donald Trump has no strategy, and it is impacting workers. Just ask the workers at GM. It is problematic. He said last week.
GM workers had nothing to do with the tariffs.
No, but he said last week that he trusts his guts more than the brains of his economic advisors, and that's scary. I mean, let's not forget this is somebody who bankrupt his business.
GM had nothing to do with the tariffs.
I want to let Paul in.
Politically, it is interesting. Tariffs are taxes, and they do fall disproportionately in our country on Trump voters and Trump counties. That's what's so amazing about this politically. As soybeans.
Soybean farm.
China has somewhat diminished its importation of American soybeans. By somewhat, I mean 95% reduction. 8 of the top 10 producing states of soybeans voted for President Trump. And yet, so he's punishing his own voters out of these fits of pique. And maybe over time he'll get us out of it, but he certainly got us into it. He's hurting his own voters.
All right, so I wanted to shift gears here in our national lead. There's now a criminal investigation into the apparent election fraud in North Carolina's 9th congressional district, and apparently it's even worse than many thought originally. CNN has learned potentially more than 1,000 absentee ballots may have been purposely destroyed, and some Republican operatives may have taken partially completed absentee ballots from voters with the envelope still open and then filled out the rest. All of this calling into question, of course, the results in that House race where Republican candidate Mark Harris edged out the Democrat Dan McCready by 900 votes. The Charlotte Observer's editorial board today issued a challenge saying that it's time to hold a new election in North Carolina's tainted 9th district. CNN's Drew Griffin is in North Carolina for us. Drew, how strong of a case are investigators building here?
Well, we don't know exactly, Jake, but what we do know is this investigation has been going on for nearly a year, and it's not just involving the vote fraud allegations, but also campaign finance operations behind it. All of this, as you say, bringing into question the outcome and the validity of North Carolina's 9th district congressional race.
The voting irregularities in North Carolina's 9th District congressional race are part of a criminal investigation that began in January and include possible vote fraud that could have affected the outcomes in 3 elections. Among the allegations, more than 1,000 absentee ballots from likely Democratic voters were gathered and destroyed.
You're looking at several thousand or approximately 2,000 absentee ballot requests from this most recent election. About 40% of those, it appears at this point, may not have been returned.
Lauren Freeman, the district attorney for Wake County, North Carolina, was sent this letter back in January by the district attorney of Bladen County, asking for help to investigate voter fraud allegations and possible false statements to affect election outcomes allegedly perpetrated by McCrae Dallas. Dallas is this man, a political operative hired by Republican congressional candidate Mark Harris. Harris won the 9th District race in a squeaker, just 905 votes. But that vote count is now in doubt because the operation run by McCrae Dallas could have affected more than 1,000 of the votes. Freeman says her office and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation are also looking at these hundreds of absentee ballots which were cast, but with suspicious witness signatures on them. A second part of the alleged scheme, where absentee ballots were only partially filled out by voters, then gathered up unsealed, allowing political operatives working for the Republican to fill in the rest.
Does it appear that there was a scheme for one or a couple or a group of people to stamp a bunch of ballots the way they wanted to stamp them and send them in?
I think this, again, is a matter that is very much under investigation. Those are the types of allegations that we are reviewing currently.
Voters like Aubrey Atkinson say McCrae Dallas actually showed up at his door to help him fill in his absentee ballot.
Well, I had to get them to spell it out to me because I can't read and write.
He can't remember who he voted for. Lacey Allison had help too. He remembers voting for sheriff, but not for Congress.
What about the congressional race? A guy named Harris and a guy named McCready.
I don't remember which one, but I do remember those two names.
Jake, Mark Harris, the Republican candidate who won this race, denies any knowledge of illegal behavior done on his behalf, but it turns out he may have, at least indirectly, paid for some of that behavior. Mark Harris's campaign paid a campaign group $400,000. That group hired this fella named McCrae Dallas. As for Dallas, he continues to ignore our